And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather looking like this, not too bad over the interior here. We've got some scattered showers around with clearing periods also up to the north here across south central Alaska, staying mostly clear. Kodiak Island with those winds diminishing. Light winds, high pressure over the southwest interior as well as much of the Bering Sea here. Trying to keep this system to the south and trying to hold that system back to the west there. Otherwise, this low that tracked from Bristol Bay late yesterday eastward here to about Yakutat tonight, just south of Yakutat. Front will push over toward the border by morning, but a lot of moisture and southwest flow continues to roll into the panhandle for another wet day tomorrow. But precipitation amounts will be lighter. And up here to the north, showers over the east side and some more showers on the west side. Mostly dry with partly to mostly sunny skies for southern Alaska. And high pressure holding there along the southwest coast, holding this storm down to the south and directing it off to the east, but it'll take a turn to the northeast on Friday. Otherwise, high pressure ridging down into the central Aleutians, light winds, dry conditions from there to the Pribilofs, all the way up into the Chukchi Sea. And the next system bringing some rain and a little bit of an increase in the wind to the western Aleutians tomorrow. New low forms and breaks off from the front as it hangs back to the west there. And that'll push another increase in some wind and rain into the central Aleutians. Stays dry to the north and the interior not looking too bad. A few scattered showers around. None down toward Bristol Bay or in south central Alaska. Rain and snow showers possible for the eastern Brooks Range, central Arctic coast. And again, this system down here slides up to the east-northeast. That'll push small craft advisory level winds and increasing rain for the southern southeast coast on Friday afternoon. And for the coastal water forecast tomorrow for the south coast of the Panhandle, west winds 20 knots and the north coast variable winds at 5 to 15 knots. South at 15 for Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay, southeast winds 15 knots for Clarence Strait. And then for the day on Friday, again with that system approaching here to the south coast, small craft advisories, southeast winds picking up to 25 to 30 knots, seas building 7 to 8 feet. Clarence Strait, small crafts also out. You're in the forecast for southeast winds increasing to 25 knots later in the day with seas around 5 feet. Southeast 15 for Stevens Passage, light northerlies for Lynn Canal and north coast here, east winds 15 to 20 knots. Prince William Sound, light northwest wind tomorrow at about 10 knots. Light variable winds at 10 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Northwest 15 here for the western North Gulf Coast and Cook Inlet, northern Cook Inlet. Light variable winds for the day Thursday, but northwest at 20. Here south of the Forelands, gale warnings for Kamishak Bay, west at 35 knots. West winds 30 knots for the Barren Islands, seas 10 to 11 feet. And for Friday, Cook Inlet, north winds 10 to 15 knots. And for Prince William Sound, northeast winds at 10 knots and east-northeast winds for the North Gulf Coast at 15 to 20 knots. Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet here, north winds at 15 knots and northeast at 15 for the Barren Islands. Kodiak Island for tomorrow, west winds 20 knots, seas 5 feet. The Alaska Peninsula, east to northeast winds 15 to 25 knots. And for Bristol Bay, northeast at 20 knots. With 4-foot seas. For Friday, northeast winds 20 knots for Bristol Bay. In fact, we got northeast winds at 20 knots all the way down to Cape Sarachev here in the Alaska Peninsula. Lighter winds on the Pacific side here from the north and northeast at about 15 knots all the way up across Kodiak Island. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, east-northeast winds 15 to 25 knots, seas around 4 to 7 feet. Adak and Atka northeast at 15 with 4 to 6 foot seas. And for the western Aleutians, south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots. And then for the day on Friday, we've got 15 to 30 knot winds blowing around a low center here just west or just east of Kiska Island. Otherwise, southeast winds 25 knots there with 5 to 8 foot seas for Adak and Atka. And the eastern Aleutians, east-southeasterlies at 15 to 20 knots. For the southwest coast, Yukon Delta coast, looking at west winds at 15 knots, northwest at 10 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. Pribilofs, east 15 knots. St. Matthew Island, south at 15 knots. And west at 20 for Norton Sound, or 15 for Norton Sound, west of 20 for St. Lawrence Island. And for Friday, north winds 10 knots for Norton Sound, Yukon Delta coast of St. Lawrence Island, 15 knots there. And northeast at about the same speed there for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, east at 15 for St. Matthew Island, east winds 20 knots for the Pribilofs with 5-foot seas. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west to south winds at 10 to 15 knots tomorrow. Southeast at 15 for the central coast. And the west side here, all the way down the Chukchi Sea, mostly west winds at 10 knots with seas running 2 to 3 feet. And then for the day on Friday, the Chukchi Sea, north winds 15 knots. Western Arctic coast, northwest at 15 knots. Southwest at 15 for the central Arctic coast, and the east side, west winds at 10 to 15 knots.